everyone, it's Emma, and today I'm doing a little review video for some books that I've read recently. Recently, I've read a couple books that I had some thoughts on, but then I realized that I didn't film reviews for any of them. So I've got 4 books here. 2 of them are YA books, one is a poetry book, and one is a manga. So I've got a good little mix here of what I've been reading recently, and I'm just gonna give some thoughts. First off, I've got The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. I've got the Barnes & Noble edition because I feel like people ask every time I hold up this book. But yeah, I've got the black Barnes & Noble edition. This book has been super hyped recently on BookTube, on Bookstagram. It seems like everyone was reading it at the same time that I was reading it. If you've been hesitant to pick it up, I understand why. There's been a lot of hype surrounding it. However, I did really enjoy it. I'm not sure if it lived up to the level of hype that there was. The ending made me understand why it was so hyped, which obviously I can't tell you why because that would be a spoiler. But by the time I got to the end of the book, I was super excited about the whole storyline, about the sequels. I'm so excited for the next books in this series. Basically, this is the human living in a fairy world story that I've always loved but never quite loved the way that it was done. I've never been fully sold on one. This one I was pretty sold on. However, this book was not one of those books where I loved the characters. It was more like this book is full of intriguing characters. I loved all the characters, just not in a way that I necessarily liked them as people, if that makes sense. More like their decisions are interesting and their moral progressions are interesting, and their relationships are interesting. I think the politics are the main focus of this book, which for me is what made me love it, because in this like fairy world kind of setting, I love political books, aka the Dark Artifices series. The basic gist is that this girl Jude and her sisters are taken to live in the fairy world, and they grow up there. They have to kind of survive in this very harsh, cruel fairy world where people are not nice to humans. Not nice at all. Jude basically gets kind of fed up with not being treated like an equal, and she starts to rebel in a way, and it just kind of takes off from there. There were so many twists and betrayals that had me in shock. I just felt like it was a really good, solid first book in a series. The other book that I read recently is Meetcute. This one is a collection of short stories by a bunch of different YA authors. I read through it as I was traveling, so I talked about it a decent amount in my vlogs that just went up. If you didn't check those out, I'll link them down below. I gave my thoughts as I was reading, since I was reading the book while I was traveling. I really enjoyed this one as well. I thought it was super cute. It was perfectly timed because Valentine's Day is coming up. If you don't know what a meet cute is, it's basically the moment that a couple meets for the first time in some cutesy cliche kind of way. Since this one is written by a bunch of different authors, it's hard to say that I loved the entire thing because, to be honest, there were some stories that I really did not enjoy and were not my favorite. But then there were other stories that totally made up for it that I loved, that I would have loved a full-on novel from. It was interesting to like switch characters so quickly because it's been a while since I read a compilation of short stories. I also feel like it was a good way for me to get introduced to some contemporary writers because I'm not the biggest YA contemporary reader. There were some authors in here that I've never read before that after reading their short stories, I was really intrigued to go look them up, see what books people like from them. My favorite stories were, let's see, Catherine McGee's, Sarah Shepard's, Emery Lord's, Jocelyn Davies, and Nicola Yoon's. I might be missing a couple that I really liked, but overall, those were my favorites. So pretty much half the stories were my favorites, which means that it was a good mix. Next, I have a poetry book, which will probably be no surprise to any of you. It is Sea of Strangers by Leav. This is Leav's new poetry book, which I read recently and I loved, which is no surprise because I've loved all of her poetry books that I've read. I do think I loved this one especially. I'm not sure if this or Memories is now my favorite. It's high up there. It may be my favorite of her poetry collections. It is beautiful, heartfelt, and a little bit tragic like all of her collections, but I also felt like this one came from a more hopeful place. I'm not sure if it's because Leav wrote it more current day, so you can see her progression as a person, or if it's just that the theme of the whole book was more hopeful. One of my favorite poems was towards the end, and it's called To Dare. Spread your wings, now is the time. To dare, to dream, to reach for the sky. This is the moment you will soar. If you want it now, you can have it all. Others will look upon your grace, and their bitter hearts will cry in spite. The best parts of you they'll try to take to dim the brilliance of your light. And as your tender courage wanes, something whispers to you, wait. Look them in the eye and say, not today. I will not let you guide my fate. This is not the day when you'll concede. You have more strength than you could know. This is when you will, if you believe, show them just how far you'll go. I love that one! Like I said, no surprise that I loved this book, but I highly suggest it. I think I say that every time I review a Leav poetry book. And the last one I have is a manga. It is Orange, the Future, Story and Art by Ichigo Takano. Not gonna lie, I'm a little bit nervous to review this one because I rave so often about Orange, the Complete Collection 1 and 2, which is the first manga I ever read. It's kind of what got me into loving manga, and this is a follow-up story that came out recently. I tried to go into it with really low expectations because I was really satisfied with how the original story ended, so I didn't necessarily feel the need for a sequel or a follow-up. However, it is from a different character's point of view. It is from Sua's point of view. I really enjoyed his character, so I tried to go into it with super low expectations, but it still kind of fell short for me. It was kind of confusing, and I feel like I would have liked to see a different narrative than the one that they went with. At the same time, I kind of think however the creator went about doing it, it wouldn't have lived up to the original series just because it was such a favorite of mine and I was so satisfied with the ambiguous ending that we were left with. I liked getting a different point of view, but at the same time I kind of didn't like Sua's thought process. Like, I didn't like the things that he thought about himself, and the whole time I just kind of wanted to like mom lecture him. That's pretty much all I can say without spoiling. I definitely do not regret reading it. It was still enjoyable because they're characters that I already love. The art style is still just as beautiful. I loved the character art. It's just not necessarily one that I would rave about in and of itself. If you read Orange and you loved Orange, I would definitely suggest giving it a try. Who knows? Maybe you'll love it. There is a movie that came out before this one, and I believe it follows the same story, so I'm still going to watch that, and I have a feeling maybe I'll like it more than the manga. Those are all the books that I'm going to talk about today. Let me know down in the comments if you read any of these recently and what you thought of them. Especially let me know if you read Orange the Future and whether you liked it or not, because I would really like to hear from some people who loved it. I hope you have a lovely day or night or afternoon wherever you are, and I will see you in my next video.